My account. Well, that's not good.
That ain't good. That's
We're
okay.
gonna get it going though. It seems like it might be. It's turning a little bit.
Oh, it's thinking.
Speaking of, people calling people out and not really always wanting to hear what they want to hear. You do that for me quite a bit, Jess, and I am very grateful for that. And so, thank you, thank you.
It is my honor and pleasure. And like, folks, if y'all didn't catch what Sean said, and that was stirred by Jared's question, is that feedback thing, like the really valuable mind shifting feedback and those types of interactions are richer with trust. And so and in my perspective, the way, how do you build that trust? You build the trust through vulnerability, sharing time, listening, and understanding each other. Hoots, I know you got a special guest. You got some solid content that you've delivered a million times. So you're gonna knock everyone's socks off. So I'm fixing to jump off the screen, and I have one question for you. Do you want me driving behind the wheel, or are you going to do all your own button pushing?
Yeah, I always want you helping me, Jess, because I know that you will call me out on my bullshito and you will bring the best out of me to be as vulnerable and as transparent as I can. So please drive in the background. And I have to say, thank you for this. This is like, holy moly. I haven't even gotten through the whole thing right now because I am stuck on story 9. And I am just like, I've had tears in my eyes reading this thing, like relating to it, because I've never gotten into the level of trouble that you may have in your past. Not to blow the book, but he gets into a shitload of trouble. But I have kind of done a lot of the same things, but just never been caught. And so you have me really, really deeply self-reflecting, and so for that, I thank you very, very much, and congratulations on the launch of your first, second book. And I can't wait to see you in San Antonio on Friday, baby.
Next week. All right, baby. I'm coming off screen. It's all you, big dog.
See ya. All right. So, as Jesse called me out, I do have a Wookiee in the background waiting for me, and I'm super excited. For those of you that don't know who I am Adam Hoots. I am with Construction Ache Solutions. I am a student and professor at Clemson University. I am a old tradesperson, I guess. I wouldn't even call myself a tradesperson. I was more of like a helper. And then I got into the GC world for 20 years and have recognized and realized that we are living in a broken system. And when I say that, I mean that with the utmost respect to the people who are, despite this broken system, continuing to labor and actually get things done. We see you out there. We recognize you that you are a human being. I just want to pause. And Jesse, you did a great job earlier of talking about kind of that common theme that's going through all this. And you stole my content, but that's okay because I've taken a thing or two from you back in the day. But it's people, it's empathy, it's respect, it's team, and it's this paradigm shift. And here in a little bit, we're going to talk about what that looks like. And, Spencer talked about relieving the stress, utilizing a tool with tact. We had Joe talking about the value proposition, and Joe described it perfect. And he actually took some of mine as well. Like, I don't have to talk to you about the broken system with the design and the skilled tradespeople and the tighter budgets and like he did an awesome job. Jesse with the SQI, like the paradigm shifts there are just magic. And then you've got Henry with the mindsets, and his book is like transcends industry. And then Sean with blind spots. All of these things that we're talking about are the system in construction that people have not figured out yet. And we have a system that we've designed to get the results that we're getting. So the suicide rates you heard about, the mental health problems, like all of these are a real thing. And it's because we're living in silos, right? It's these silos, it's this linear thinking. And so I want to take a quick second and recognize the fact that I have I've been looking at systems thinking for 4 or 5 years now, maybe longer, and I can't quite put my finger on it. So I need you, Omniverse. Like, help me through this thing. When you hear something that's like, oh yeah, makes sense, rings a bell, et cetera, et cetera, help me out. Chime in, comment, ask some questions. I want to define systems thinking for you real fast. And I got this straight off of Google, Wikipedia, nothing crazy. It's a way of making sense of a complex world by looking at it in terms of wholes and relationships rather than splitting it down into parts. It has been used as a way of exploring and developing effective action in complex contexts, enabling systems change. And so we have one of the most complex systems that has not been figured out. And what we're used to from a thinking perspective is what's called linear thinking, where we have inputs and we have outputs, right? So we do A, we get B. We do B, we get C. We do, and it's a linear thinking perspective versus what if C affects B and B affects A, right? It's this if and then formula that really starts to develop this circular line of thinking that really gets us kind of out of control in some points. And so I want to talk to you again, high level about systems. I brought in my own Chewy. I asked Jesse for the other Chewy, but he said he was in Hawaii grinching it out or something like that. And so I brought my own Chewbacca to the table. And before, as soon as I start to geek out too much, I want to bring him on board. So Jesse, feel free to be the gauge of that as well backstage. I want to talk to you about two thoughts, two types of systems. The first one is a vicious system. Now, a vicious system, it's unbalanced, it's uneven. I really think of it a lot of times like a spiral where it's kind of going out of control. Yeah, shout out Maria Martin, one of my homies there. But so this vicious system, right? And think about our job sites when things aren't in control, when we don't have the right feedback set up, when we're not paying attention to the right things or solving the right problems. We have this kind of out of control and it's hard to gauge, hard to predict where it's going to be. Versus the other type of system is what's called a virtuous system. And that's a system that lives on in perfect harmony, right? Some people would say the same speed, the same distance apart. And so it's living on and it's got these balancing loops and reinforcing loops, which we'll talk about now. They're called feedback loops. Okay. And so, as these feedback loops, as we start picking up, is the system working, right? What should we start, stop, or continue? We've got reinforcing loops, and those amplify the system. They amplify what we're doing versus balancing loops, which once we have change initiated to where we want to go, then we can dive in and really start to understand, are we reinforcing a vicious system or are we reinforcing a virtuous system? And when we can get it in a virtuous state, what are we doing such that we can continue to balance that and make that happen? And so I want you to really think about your project sites. What kind of systems do you have on your job sites? Okay. And we talk about those proverbial silos, and that means a lot because in the end, those silos are connected here as we start to explore what a true system is. And so, enough geeking out on terms and systems and things of that nature. I'm excited to bring up my guest, my Wookiee, as you called it, Mr. Charlie Dunn. Charlie, how are you, sir? Oh boy. How about you're muted. You got me.
There we go.
There he is.
So, Adam, we got one question. So we start there and see where this goes.
Deal.
Justin said, can we have a virtuous and a vicious system that exist in the same space?
Man, I think that's huge because yeah, you can have systems within systems. However, you will never have a virtuous system within a vicious system, right? Because a system's either vicious or virtuous. And if there's any type of viciousness in it, then it's not a virtuous system. I think it's important to note that you can have systems within systems, though, because I think Jesse did a great job talking about Zoom levels, especially with regards to how close to the work are you? Well, as close to the work as I am provides me another system and different feedback loops that are affecting that system. What do you think?
Yeah, I believe the best answer for Justin is a simple yes. That you can have some virtuous systems. We think about a project site, and we often talk about, hey, if the toxic culture stops within our, outside our walls, like that's how we try to fight to win. Like we create that team that even in the middle of a toxic culture, we're a solid team. So that might be an example of trying to create that virtuous, or in the middle of a vicious system. I actually, Justin, you give us follow up. Is there something else you were leaning into, or a specific example you had there? Adam,
I like what you're saying, because there can most certainly be virtuous systems out there that exist within a system that's out of control, or a vicious system, right? I mean, and I think we see that every day in construction, where we do have some job sites that are focused on people, but we don't have job sites that have all of their systems figured out. Like, what is that perfect system for construction, and how do we get there? I mean, that to me is part of the most interesting research that we can do as humans right now.
So, Adam, yeah, I mean, you gave us some of the theory. I want to know, when did you become interested in systems thinking? Like, what was your?
Oh man, I'm following the Wookiee here. Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. I'll tell you, about 7 years ago, 7 years ago, I went to Boston and did a systems thinking master class with Hal Maycomer, to which I read the book Thinking in Systems by Donella Meadows. We read the book The Fifth Discipline by Peter Senge, all of which talk about, how one thing can affect another that affects another. And by the time you know it, you've affected something that you had no idea, right? You have unintended consequences. And I was fascinated with that, because there were changes on job sites. Like, I always looked at my job site, and you and I have had this conversation. And one of the reasons I wanted you on here is because, in my mind, again, with this Zoom level perspective, the system was always the job site, because that's how I was wired. Like, and to answer Jesse's question earlier, what's a trade partner? Well, I think of the organization, right? Because that was the Zoom level that I had at the time. And so when I think of a system, I'm thinking from a project perspective, and trying to understand what changes can I make and affect. And I was doing things that, hell, I thought was the right thing. And that, like, here's a perfect example for you. I was at Clemson building a job down there, and I was like, I'm going to put up signs that tells everybody how many days we have left on this project. And I was like, hell yeah, this is a great idea. And I was going to go and I was going to change the sign every day. Well, the signs kept getting ripped down. They kept getting like things wrote on them that were probably a little bit inappropriate. And come to find out, the tradespeople hated it, because they were like, oh, so 55 days and then you're going to fire me, and then you're going to get rid of me. And then what am I supposed to do? And so that was like a rude awakening to me, where I was like, man, I'm just trying to help everybody out by letting them know how much time we have left. And they looked at it as like a countdown clock of the end of their career, and what are they going to do after that. And so that was a really, really deep check for me of unintended consequences when it comes to the entire system. All
right. So now I want to, Justin followed up, tried to reframe it. Does a virtuous and vicious system describe the system's current state? Justin, I'm going to assume you're talking about construction, and perhaps, but I believe there is a better word to describe what we have now, which is a lack of systems understanding for construction, a lack of a complete system, or if I maybe simplest statement would be, it's incompleteness. That's our current system. We are missing things. And that's what allows, what Adam described to happen. An unintended consequence. Adam's pulling a lever and the system hasn't even been defined. So it's raw luck. Does he get better or does he get worse? And I see this all the time with technology stuff coming into construction. And I'm a huge fan for technology. I mean, obviously I'm sitting here, broadcasting from the Millennium Falcon today,
I like it.
But we don't have standards, baseline data, and the ability to do continuous improvement. We simply don't.
Yeah.
We get
You
lucky, or we don't get lucky. We don't have systems knowledge and understand the levers and their impacts, and that's really profound once you kind of lean into that, and you're aware, like, hey, wait a second, I thought I was going to get this outcome, I actually got the opposite. And
yeah.
that's Meadows points that out, that's often, once you fully understand your system, you realize the lever you've been using gave you exactly the opposite outcome that you were hoping for.
Yeah, collectively, I don't think we are there from a systems thinking standpoint. I think that, the industry, I feel like, is a lot like me. They're like, okay, I get that there's this system out there, but what does it mean? And what do I do in order to make change within that system? And you mentioned some of that, right? A couple of leverage points and one, like this whole conference, this whole decentralized conference has been about people, and that, I think, is the most powerful paradigm mind shifts that we can do in order to change the system. Charlie, what do you think the shift towards having a more people focus is going to do for the system of construction?
There, I guess I have a couple thoughts. One, I feel like that's just like a fundamental foundation. You have to, I believe you have to teach from a state of rest. So if we're going to teach about a system, we need to be in a state of rest, a state of psychological safety. So I believe that's kind of good, just by that. It's a fundamental requirement. um, I also believe that as we fully define the system and gain understanding of these things, that we're going to realize, some of the things we thought were incentives are actually disincentives. Some of the things we value and promote actually, you know, create some of the chaos and uncertainty, that we see. Um, I see a question here from Maria that it's probably a good time to shift to: what types of things to do in the systems and system situations, one vicious, one virtuous. And I'm going to come back to that. Like, the first thing you have to do is make sure you have a full understanding of your system,
Pause
because
and reflect. A
yeah,
wise man once taught me that.
yeah, we knee jerk. We stay in this constant state of motion and action, and we don't take the time to stop and study. A statement that Jesse heard this week that I'm really going to continue to lean into is, I don't need the firefighting superintendent. The reality is that dude is probably an arsonist. I need the quiet scientist who's going to study the problem, love the problem, learn about the problem, and then when he acts, it's going to be intentional. It's going to have a depth of strategy to it, and it's going to stick. You know, um, I think that's probably, we talked a little bit before this, Adam, about some of the indications that you're missing information in your system, that your system's incomplete. One of those would be just this randomness of response. A lack of intentionality about plan and schedule. Like, if you see chaotic response, it's absolutely a system problem.
Yeah, that's paying attention to feedback, right? And that's kind of getting into a little bit of the silo that I think Sean was living in, of you got to listen, and you really got to listen. And Jesse talks a little bit about the whispers, right? And when the whispers get too loud, it's time to pay attention. And those whispers are feedback to a system that you've designed, or whether it's how you act personally or it's how you act professionally. I think it's I think it's important to take regular pause and reflect moments to say, what should I start, what should I stop, and what should I continue. Right? Those are points where you can have leverage in your system, and you can make a change in what you're doing. um, and I also think that it's really important to note that sometimes there can be a delay in that feedback, right? You can do something and not recognize change for a month or 6 months or a year. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, it's kind of like the prophecy of how bamboo grows, right? It's like it takes 3 years for the roots to develop. And then in like 2 or 3 months, the bamboo tree is annoyingly everywhere, is what they say. And so I think it's important. And that's a whole nother piece of like systems thinking, is that whole iceberg model, right? It's like you see the event at the top, like you see what happens that's outside the water, but what you don't see is the time and effort and energy that it went into, and the structure and the systems that are in place underneath the surface that are really contributing to that success. Most people just are able to see the success. I think that iceberg model is super important when it comes to understanding systems, because you have the events, then you have those patterns, and then you have the true structure that went into developing patterns and events.
So, in fairness to Maria's question, when I come back, because I answered in a different way, but the intent, I think she'd say, hey, what are some strategies? So you recognize something you're in a vicious system. What do you do? Virtuous. What do you do? I'll start with the virtuous, because then I think, to me, one of the best strategies I've seen carries over into the vicious as well. You have to, amplify the good, recognize the good. And that really is a leadership, and then modeling the behavior you want, which to me has become really a fundamental thing on teams and success. How do I find and build those leaders that are going to model the behavior we want? That's a simple fact of high performing teams. Often the time we have to build the team is not long enough to get to the high performing teams, unless we have ability to seed the teams with people who are going to model this behavior, lean in and recognize the value of that. And then at the same time, you've got to stop that reinforcing loop. If you're in a vicious system, stop the negative cycles, call it out. We had this other conversation about this golden moment opportunity. And that, to me, maybe is where you can have an indicator. Are you in a vicious or are you in a virtuous system? You're going to have failures. Fact. People do work. People make mistakes. In that moment, when there's a failure or there's a mistake, you have this golden moment opportunity. You're going to go one of two directions. You're going to go ego, or you're going to build trust. And on the ego path, you're going to create some vicious behavior. You're going to be right. You're going to be harsh. You're going to crush some people. You're going to force some people to wall up. You're going to cut off conversation. You're going to ask the wrong questions, the leading questions, the yes/no questions, because you're on a mission. It's your ego. You're about being right, telling everybody how wrong they were, and this is a failure. It's not going to happen again. Or in this golden moment, you can literally mint gold. You can demonstrate to someone that their value is greater than whatever the impact of this mistake is, and that you're going to first value them, reinforce that they're part of the team. You have their back. You're leaning in so that we learn. And you really don't know, to me, honestly, what kind of team you have until you hit those golden moments. Until you hit the hard stuff,
Well, you're talking about feedback, right? And we have two types of feedback. It's you either have reinforcing feedback, which is amplifying either a virtuous or vicious system, or you have feedback that's balancing, that you're able to say, okay, yeah, it's working and it's continuing to happen. And so I love where you're going, and to be able to print gold in those situations, that's learning, right? Like that's getting better, that's improving, that's focusing on people. I just want to take a quick second again to recognize two things, and then I'm done, and you can close it however you want, Charlie. Systems are everywhere, right? And if you don't think you're in a system, I got news for you. You are in a system. And so if you need to take control of that system, you need to design that system, because when you do that, your life becomes better. You become more liberated. You become more open, more vulnerable. You might even write a book about becoming the promise you're intended to be. So identify your system and then design the system. Take steps, take intentional steps to experiment with your systems and understand what I'm doing is seeking the outcome that I intend, and if it's not, then change something within that system. And so the other thing I'll leave you with is keep in mind the Zoom levels. Like it's so important, whether or not I'm looking at myself as like my own system and my own daily habits, or how I interact with the team around me, or how I interact with my family. All of these are systems, and all of these systems interact with other systems. And when we can fully start to understand the impact of one change to another, man, we're going to be able to make some gold. We're going to be able to print some gold, as you say, Charlie. So I appreciate having you on here, Chewy Dose, my man. How would you? What are your final thoughts? How would you close this thing out?
Well, the reason you want to mint that gold is that you're going to need some gold in the bank in the future. that first golden moment's not going to be the only one. You're going to have other failures where, okay, do we have that gold in the bank? So you invest and you put that gold in the bank. And the second thing I'll leave you with is this, you identify gaps in the system by certain signs. How we estimate for cost in construction, the financial cost and the people cost. We know we don't understand our system because of how we estimate. And I'll leave you with one simple thing, because it's a mission I'm on with prefabrication, as a way to create a better working environment for people, a safer working environment, an environment that brings us into the next generation of worker that loves robotics and automation and tech and code and all those things we're going to need to meet the world's demand. But this one simple question I hear all the time: well, isn't prefabrication more expensive? Simple response: if we're talking about the cost for the planet, prefabrication is always the least expensive option. And we have to have a system that is that broad and it understands we're not just working in this construction silo. We're working in a planet populated by human beings, and we have to have a system that understands and measures the right things. And that's going to create our ability to lever that number one. And I said two, I got to throw one more in there because we didn't talk about Adam. If you guys have never read Donella Meadows' list called Leverage Points, just Google Meadows Leverage Points. What you're going to see is there's 9 leverage points in order of priority. And we spend a lot of time in like 7, 8, and 9. Number 1 is paradigm shift. That's what Jesse's about. Paradigm shift, mindset change, a people thing. So
here it is.
There you go.
All right. Look at that.
You see where the most, the point with the most leverage, right, is that paradigm shift and mindset shift, as Charlie's talking about. So yes, go read the book, go find this out. It's magic. If you want to print gold for your jobs, go get it.
Boom. Well, I'm not going to let y'all off that easy. So I'm learning. So we Decentralized Conference, first time ever. I was hoping that all the comments from the various outlets would come into this feed, but they don't. So I was like stalking you, Adam, on your LinkedIn channel. So there's other comments and questions coming up there that we can't see on this feed back here. And so, but I pulled one out, Sean, in response to the comment you made, Harry. He's like, the quiet superintendent equals the future of construction. Why not? My interpretation of that question is, why isn't that the norm, or what would it take for that to be the norm?
What is the quiet superintendent? Can you define that for me?
I'll hand that to Harry.
Yeah, so Adam, I think that's my quiet scientific superintendent, as opposed to the firefighting possible arsonist. So the person whose first response is to pause and reflect rather than attack and demand. Right? Don't go louder, go quieter. Bring other people in. Another way I've heard this guy that inspired this thought is a guy who said, hey, I'm looking for creative problem solvers. How do I bring those people to the table with me? Because this project's so gnarly and nobody's smart enough to figure it all out. And I've got to create that kind of environment. That's the quiet scientific superintendent.
Boom.
Yeah, I guess from my perspective, it doesn't matter if you're quiet or loud or throwing your hard hat, right? As long as you're focused on respecting people and establishing flow on your job, that's everything. And that will help your system all the way across the board. And so the level of volume of the superintendent, not important in my book.
10-4. Well, I'm going to pose a thought from this plumber's perspective. We have a culture in our industry that places value on people's volume and assertiveness. If somebody sits down and doesn't say something, they lack leadership skills. When somebody opens their damn mouth every time there's a microsecond of silence, that person's a leader. And I'll just say that is not a trustworthy indicator of leadership. How does that land with y'all?
I like it.
I'm right there with you.
Yeah.
And Jesse, I gotta leave you with this too. So for me, the why the Wookiee?
Yes.
The Wookiee side always wins, baby.
Yes, sir, it does. Trust the Wookiee, y'all. Well, Charlie, Adam, y'all did a phenomenal job of closing down day one of the Decentralized Conference. I've seen some comments out there about, is this thing recorded? Absolutely. It's going to live in different places, but the compilation of all the conversations are going to be on the YouTube channel. So I'll be sharing that. And also for all the speakers that shared their time with us today, I'll be sending you all the link to the raw video so that you can cut it up, clip it up, do whatever you want with it. Continue to share it. Adam, to your point, I feel like the conversations and the ideas, the tone of the conversation today is largely absent. And the beautiful thing is the instructions were, let's do this live stream thing and speak about whatever you want to speak about. And we just kind of, that self-organizing system that you introduced me to, Charlie, right? It just ended up this way. There was not a lot of parameters except for start time and finish time. Adam, I appreciate you for shouting out the book. It is a really intimate deal. And yes, I am leveraging this experience, this decentralized conference, to give people some awareness that the book's coming out. And I just posted a link. Like, I would love for you to get the book, and I would love for you to read it, and I would love for it to impact you. What I really, really, really want, I want to know personally how it made you feel when and if you ever do read it. Now, you don't have to go buy the book. You can also go to the blog. So I put the link down there, depthbuilder.com/blog, where I've been dumping in weekly entries that kind of tease or give some behind the scenes insight to each of the stories that I shared. And, you know, Adam, you talked about some of the stuff that I share in there. Family member of mine was like, dude, like, are you sure the statute of limitations on those things have worn out? I was like, you know what? I didn't think about that. So I hope so. I really hope so. Folks out there in the Omniverse, thank you for your time. If this landed with you and it's scratching that itch that you've had and you couldn't reach, and you know other people that have the same itch, share this with them. Everybody that's up here today and everybody's going to be up here tomorrow really do give a damn about people. And we're all about leaving this world better than we found it. So appreciate y'all for your time. Charlie, Adam, thank you both, gentlemen, very much.
Thank you, Jess.
Peace. Now we got to do the dance.